Jaguar's new EV concept, the Type 00, has gotten a lot of attention, partly because of the advertising campaign and partly because of the design of the concept. But what about the real car? All we've seen are camouflage prototypes, and sure, Jaguar is taking its time with the reveal of the real production car, and you know what? Following new cars the way I do, if there's a new pet peeve that's getting really tired, it's the renders. Nothing is more annoying now than seeing an article from some automotive website or even a mainstream non-auto website posting an article that appears to be the reveal only for it to turn out to be renders from some visual artist going, hey, maybe it'll look like this, maybe it won't. And sure, fantasizing about potential designs is fun and all, but there's a point where it's over-reported and it just gets annoying, especially when the renders clearly have no basis for what we've seen from the prototypes. It's really prevalent with the Jag, it's been a thing with the new Alfa Romeo Stelvio, and all of the various JDM cars that have been announced, so I just want to rant about it real quick here. Ever since the Jaguar Type 00 concept debuted at Miami Art Week in 2024, many have been trying to figure out what the real car will look like, especially since camouflage production cars were revealed before the concept's reveal. And the thing with concept cars is that we're usually left to discern how much of that car will actually relate to the real thing. Especially since concept cars are rather devoid of anything resembling reality, even if it's meant to prelude an actual production car of some sort. The Jag's case is rather specific too, as the first time we saw Jag's relaunch car it was a camoed 4-door saloon. Meanwhile, the concept was a long, low-slung coupe with a plethora of fantasy features. So, what's an automotive journalist to do when they have little to go off for information regarding the actual production features? Easy. Find a 3D artist, or in these days an AI program, and cook up some renders. Realism not required. Though that's not to say some artists haven't tried to model their cooking off of the camo car. Meanwhile, plenty of others have just tried to reimagine the concept as a 4-door, often leaving in the unrealistic production bits like the thin A-pillars, the bizarre tail lighting, or the unrealistic proportions. Or also just ignoring the fact that the camo car doesn't seem to feature the mix of curves and hard angles on the front fascia that the concept has. An article on the Independent UK does feature a somewhat more realistic take on the concept, but I think the most realistic by far is the guy who used Photoshop to modify a photo of a Saab 9-3 to match the proportions of the Jag prototype. Quite nice looking too, actually. I suppose since we have the concept, the Jaguar renders have stayed relatively close to something maybe resembling reality. Yet perhaps the real rendering crimes are those seen with people's perceptions of the upcoming Alfa Romeos, where some truly heinous looking creations have been unleashed on automotive blogs, all based purely on the artist's speculative fantasy, which then somehow makes the news just because there's nothing else to write about, I guess? The most notable target right now has been the Alfa Romeo Stelvio's second generation, probably because it's due the soonest. A camo prototype exists now in photo form, but before that, artists were just throwing the most avant-garde looking monsters into the mix, which was odd considering one should find it sensible to look at Alfa's other newer cars like the Tonale, Junior, or the new Stradale. After all, when new cars debut, it's often typical that the manufacturer follows their latest design trend, which in Alfa's case would be the controversial new styling of the Junior. With the new Stelvio now finally out and about in camouflage, what we can see seems to indicate that the Stelvio will follow the Junior's design cues, and some newer renders seem to reflect this. But now this means we're going to have to sit through renders of the next Giulia generation, as well as the Tonale. We can probably expect these cars to follow suit with what we've seen, although the Tonale being further out could come out with a bit of a change. However, no doubt some artists will simply ignore this and create some more bizarre creations, much like what we've seen so far. There's already plenty of odd Giulia renderings out there for its second generation. But none of that even really compares to what people are dreaming about from Japan. News keeps circulating about revivals of the Toyota Celica and MR2. These cars have been out of production for a while, so there really is nothing to go off of except current Toyota design trends. Problem is, especially with the MR2, there's a physical car called the FTSE. Maybe not actually the MR2, but it's not too far out there as far as what's capable of being produced, and it kind of looks like an MR2. Should the MR2 return, the FTSE seems to be the most realistic avenue. Yet this hasn't stopped any number of 3D renders and AI terrors that all look mostly awful. Some of them may not be totally unrealistic looking, but so far it's a car whose return is mostly rumor, no matter how much the automotive press tries to stress otherwise. But I suppose the Supra is ending and Honda has the Prelude coming out, so maybe a new Celica will sit somewhere above the GR86 or will serve as a replacement for both the 86 and the Supra. Or maybe not. Who knows? But every auto site is asking if the car is coming back, and they've dug up some renders to illustrate their articles with. And sure, some look okay, but they're all just not real. And it just gets so tiring article after article about what something that doesn't exist yet could look like if it was real. And could is such a vague, loaded word that ultimately means nothing in this context. It's just fantasy, and it gets so tiring. It is fun to dabble in this stuff from time to time, but websites making clickbait articles with no real, actual information in it has gotten to the point of being utterly ridiculous. I get they have to keep the lights on and authors have article quotas to meet, but man, there's gotta be some real news they can write about. Though hey, maybe that's hypocritical for me, because this video isn't really news either. It's just ranting about things that don't exist and looking for viewers like you to listen to my whining and either agree or disagree with it in the comments. But I guess I want to try and keep the lights on too.